So I want to start. How many of you out there were aware that Google was a venture investor? So, about 30 or 40%, but so the rest of the audience was unaware of the fact. So give me, before we get into the way you use data, tell me just the quick facts. How much do you put to work, and what's your sort of philosophy about how you invest?
Sure. So Google Ventures is Google's venture arm, up to $200 million a year into a variety of startups. We'll probably do upwards of 100 investments in the next 12 months. We do a lot of hands-on engagement with our portfolio. You mentioned data, which is really important to us. It's one of the frames we use to think about venture investing. And at its heart, it's a team of, right now, 43 people who are entrepreneurs, investors, scientists, who care deeply about startups, having started companies, and are highly focused on engaging with our portfolio to really help them make a difference by using the resources at Google, be it facilities, data tools, or the 30,000 people that work there who are all expert in something. And so we encourage and have had a lot of engagement with those resources with our portfolio.
You kind of have an unfair advantage. It's like, well, if you take our investment and we'll scale Google for you.
Thank you. That's part of the pitch, is that we do have an advantage that we're trying to use to help our entrepreneurs. Starting a company is really difficult and sometimes lonely, and if you can get the help of people that can help you find your next engineer, sort of our recruiting efforts to help find technical talent, or solve some UX design problems that you may not even know that you had, that can be really powerful for a startup. So we've got every reason to lean in there.
So let me ask you what this data-driven approach to investing is. I've had a couple of meetings with you where you've described it to me. Describe to the audience how you use data to make decisions about which companies you invest in.
So let's assume there are two ways to think about problems and their solutions, qualitatively and quantitatively. Traditionally, the venture business is highly driven by qualitative assessments. What do I think of this person on my first meeting? Do I trust them? Are they referred by someone I know? And those are really important insights. We're trying to also look quantitatively and apply some data tools and metrics around some questions that it makes natural sense to us to try and look at. The team is largely from Google, so a lot of computer scientists and others who have been at Google a long time and are accustomed to thinking of these kinds of problems as ones that you can solve by applying the data frame, if you will.
Graham, you've actually built software that does this. What data informs it?
Well, so
what's your secret sauce?
Well, you can imagine the premise for this project is just that Google, as you know, has some of the world's experts in statistics, economics, machine learning. And so we thought it would be worth at least doing an experiment to see if we could take some of their knowledge and techniques and apply that to this domain of entrepreneurship and venture capital. So when we as VCs sit around a table thinking about a company, we look at all kinds of data qualitatively. We look at the entrepreneurs and what they've done in the past. We look at the market. We look at the product. And so what we're trying to do is just take all of those heuristics or rules of thumb that VCs are already using, trying to see which sets of those rules can be turned into something quantitative.
Do you take any of the data that you have that is exclusive to Google, like search query data or app usage data on Android, or data like that you can leverage that is a unfair advantage?
Well, the thing that I would imagine doing with that is trying to figure out which companies are growing quickly, but that turns out to actually solve a problem that we don't really have. I mean, we have really good deal flow at Google because we have great connections into the world of entrepreneurship and great connections with other VCs. So we don't lack for deal flow. We see a lot more companies than we can invest in. So what we focus our quantitative efforts on is trying to understand when a company comes to us and is presenting some information and telling us about their history and their financing and all that kind of stuff. We want to use our analytics to try and figure out to try and get a better sense of whether we should invest. We sort of join this quantitative work that we're doing with the insights and intuitions.
You literally do have a software platform that you've built where you plug in this data and it gives you a dashboard you can look at. Is that not true?
I wish I could call it a platform. That sounds fancy. I mean, we actually have
Like a hacked together Excel spreadsheet?
we have a lot of different tools. You know, we a lot of times we approach this from the perspective of trying to answer specific questions. So we might say, you know, we could invest in small companies, medium-sized companies, large companies, which would be best from a portfolio perspective. And so we'll do some modeling around that question to try and understand what's going to be best for the firm overall.
Well, that raises the question, you know, a company that puts $200 million to work or more every year, you don't act like a normal VC in that, you know, who's your limited partners?
Who at Google acts normally? I mean, it's not something that we're striving to achieve.
I haven't noticed. So, in other words, what I'm saying is that you don't have like limited partners and
we have one limited partner. It's set up as a separate entity.
Right.
We work for the venture fund. Google provides the capital, and we make our investment decisions. We're not investing strategically to help Google with any product or sort of goal.
So is your goal just to net return back to Google?
Financial return.
Financial return to Google. And how much are you
Well, financial return to the team and to Google. It is a venture fund.
So you get paid.
Or not paid, depending on the outcomes. Right.
Well, good luck with that. So there was seriously, one example that I want to get into because it was just very recently announced. And also I think quite interesting given that in the air over the past day and a half we've been talking about the public-private conversation, the use of data, the role of policy and government, and Tim in the opening remarks mentioned that we are at a moment where we are having a conversation about what is the role of government. You just invested in a company that is a very data-driven company that essentially is taking over where the government is leaving off for lack of funds. Can you explain that investment?
Sure. You're talking about DNA Nexus, I think, which is a super interesting company that we're really excited about. They are building a back-end system to help researchers use and understand genomic data, which can be massive data sets. There's a database called the SRA database that the government has been hosting as a resource for researchers, and it was potentially under threat for budget reasons, and so DNA Nexus stepped forward. We made some introductions to folks at Google that we know and have worked with for a long time, and it made sense for Google to start hosting that database with DNA Nexus's support so that research tool remains available to researchers everywhere. This is not a proprietary tool for just the company to
Right.
use.
So we're talking about a massive back end that allows for genomic information to be used for research and, you know, non-personally identifiable, I'm assuming.
Totally anonymized. It's a government database.
As a pool of, you know, processable data, and it's on Google's servers. So your genes could be on Google's servers. Is that
Well, I
in any
wouldn't-
way? I mean,
I wouldn't say that. Let's not make that the headline. This is a.
I'm not trying to. But I am interested in the fact that Google has the processing power, the capital, and frankly the interest, and sees the commercial opportunity.
I think it's. I would.
And the government seems not to.
I would frame it and say that DNA Nexus saw an opportunity to make this tool available and chose Google as the storage provider. This will be one of the largest instances of storage in Google's cloud. It's a massive database. But for the investment in DNA Nexus and the company and its leadership stepping forward and saying, we want to help host this data, I don't know that Google would be taking this step.
I think it's extraordinary, and I certainly hope, you know, great things come out of it in terms of the research.
It's really important work. I mean, we have a theme of trying to invest around important problems and people working on some of the hardest problems, and this is a company that's a great example of that. They're trying to do something really difficult, and we're trying to help them every way we can.
Well, we're out of time, but I want you to give me, both of you, just 3 or 4 of the investments that you've made, companies that you've invested in, and just very quickly what they do.
Sure. Well, we talked about DNA Nexus. Climate Corporation is another company. Former Googler David Freeberg founded the company. They provide weather insurance for farmers. Adamab is a computational biology company on the topic of big data. Google has provided them 1 million hours of core processor time to help them solve some computational problems. They're developing an antibody discovery platform. Those are the first ones that come to the top of my mind.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we're out of time. That is a 10-minute conversation. Thank you very much for coming to Web2 and telling us about Google Ventures.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. All right.